Former President Donald J. Trump has been indicted yet again in what may yet be the most consequential case he could face amid his myriad federal and state charges. Alongside the government's bid to prosecute all those involved in the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol, Trump, as the leader of the mob, now faces charges related to his attempted overturning of the 2020 election results. The 4 felony charges include conspiring to defraud the government, witness tampering, conspiring against the rights of citizens, and obstructing an official proceeding. The former president was arrested and arraigned on Thursday. My guest is Corey Bretschnieder, professor of political science at Brown University, author of numerous books, including When the State Speaks, What Should It Say? How Democracies Can Protect Expression and Promote Equality, and The Oath and the Office, A Guide to the Constitution for Future Presidents. Corey had been one of our go-to guests during the Trump administration. Welcome back to the program.
Thanks. Pleasure to be here and to be back in touch and to do your show again. And of course, especially on such a historic occasion.
So first, this particular set of charges didn't have as much to do with Trump whipping up the mob directly and getting them to the Capitol on January 6th to overturn the election in that way. It had to do with a sort of interference of the process. Can you explain to me why Special Counsel Jack Smith brought these particular charges, but not the charges around insurrection directly?
Sure, and I think that is a good way to put it, that there was a sort of focus on the riot itself at the Capitol and the events that happened, the speech on the ellipse, and there was a lot of speculation that he might be charged with insurrection or with incitement to riot. That was the sort of simplest thing to look at in a normal circumstance. But instead, I think what's going on here is, first of all, a widening of the focus, focusing on, as the first count alleges, conspiracy to defraud the United States, or the second, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, is a wider inquiry into what he did. And the events of January 6th are certainly relevant, but insofar as they played a role in his overall desire and actions, not just desire, to stop, for the first time in American history, the peaceful transition of power. So I think that was the idea, to sort of broaden out. I'm not sure why. I mean, certainly they could have charged these 4 counts and also charged insurrection. And one of the benefits of charging insurrection is that might come with a disqualification for running for office in the future, which to me is something, of course, that I'd want to see. But they might have been worried about that politicization of the issue by attaching a charge that would carry with it disqualification for running, because it would run into the worry that this really was a political prosecution. So they avoid that. I guess too, these are the easier things to show. They're sort of the bare bones. They've been used before in the January 6th prosecutions. Yeah, so I would say too, and I would add that for those who are really asking why there wasn't a charge of insurrection, with the clear implication that he wouldn't be able to run again, maybe that we should wait, that it still is possible that as he builds this case, that the special counsel could bring a superseding indictment that adds that charge. So I'm waiting to see. I mean, I certainly think there's enough evidence, there has been for a long time, on these 4 counts, and I would think too on insurrection as well, especially since, you know, the injustice so far has been, why are all these low-level people being charged with the events surrounding January 6th, the general concern to obstruct the transition of power, but the person at the top is not. And this is a clear answer to that. He is. And I think, you know, part of the justice would come from adding insurrection eventually, and we might see it.
Now, it seems as though Trump's response, every step of the way, of course, is that he is the victim of a political witch hunt, that they are politicizing the federal government and politicizing the Justice Department to go after him. But of course, not going after him is a politicization, and his constant drumbeat of these accusations is having a politicizing effect. It does have an impact that sort of protects him more than it might protect somebody who, say, would sort of silently accept the consequences of his actions. I mean, and that is just really troubling, because his vociferousness, his bullying, his actions as a bully do impact, even though they shouldn't, the charges that he faces. At least they impact the speed at which he's facing them, which has been extremely slow, right?
Yes, and the argument that says we shouldn't charge him with insurrection because we're worried about what these supporters might do, I don't find that convincing at all. They're going to react to these charges. They would react to other charges as well. And I guess I also think I'll come back to the parallel. I mean, the other charge that hasn't come up, that's a possibility, should, I think, be charged here, is seditious conspiracy. That was charged in the case of the Oath Keepers. Why is it not being charged here? It's the same general conspiracy, I think, that's going on to obstruct the election. So I don't find it convincing at all when people worry about the reaction, the violent reaction of his supporters. That worry is an argument against any charges. Now we're beyond that point, so we might as well charge what he's actually guilty of.
So let's talk about the specific charges that he is facing. It turns out that Mike Pence, former vice president, is essentially going to be a witness, because as vice president, he was charged with, or he was supposed to be the one counting the electoral votes. And so what exactly is the role that Pence is going to be called upon to play? There's an interesting aside seeing the evidence that is being rolled out, where it turns out that Trump accused him of being, quote unquote, too honest.
Right. So one thing that I think marks this trial to come, and that's, in addition to its moral urgency, that's going to be fascinating about it, is that Trump, I think, is going to try to double down on the idea that he was fulfilling his constitutional role, that he does take the Constitution seriously. And that is all going to implicate the constitutional views of a former law professor named John Eastman, who is really at the center of this. Eastman spoke at the Ellipse, and Eastman really presented Trump with this general theory that under the 11th Amendment and the Electoral Count Act, that the vice president had a particular role to play in the transition of power. This was a completely novel and bogus reading of the Constitution, so I want to say that up front. But the way that Eastman saw it, and that he explained to Trump, and that Trump, of course, embraced, despite being told by basically everyone else that this guy was just a fraud. Eastman was lying about all this. What it says is that the 11th Amendment gives the power to the vice president of the United States to certify the votes and as the state electors come in, and that if he believes, the vice president alone, that these votes are fraudulent, that he could not refuse to certify the votes. Now, what that would have led to is a failure of Biden to have gotten the necessary number of electoral votes. And under the rules of the Electoral College, it would have thrown the vote to the House of Representatives, where in a very complicated procedure, the House would vote in state delegations. Then that would throw everything into chaos. The House would vote and Trump would win the election. That was the plan. And it was all based on this idea of the vice president's role. Now, thankfully, the vice president, Pence, said this is ridiculous. He evidently reportedly heard from Dan Quayle that was ridiculous. He heard from his lawyers and basically everyone that Eastman and Trump were making this up, that they were engaged in a sort of phony baloney constitutional law exercise. So, talking about firsthand accounts of the pressure on the vice president to do this is crucial here, because so much of it is about whether or not Trump really believed the phony baloney stuff or knew it was phony baloney. And what Pence is going to say, based on what I've been reading, is that he knew, that he said things to him like, "You're such a Boy Scout, you follow the rules all the time," really getting across.
But it seems as though Pence is still trying to protect Trump by saying that it was crackpot lawyers surrounding the president, giving him bad advice. Is that because he's worried that Trump's huge popularity among the GOP base, is something that he stands to alienate?
What I've heard him doing to hedge, I think it's right to say he's hedging, and he's hedging by saying, "I'm not sure there's enough evidence to justify criminal conviction and a prison term, but he did some really bad stuff." That's a way of hedging against those who don't want to see him prosecuted. But what I hear, and I could see how you would react that way when he talks about the specific crackpot lawyers that are around him, is exactly what Jack Smith is saying, that these crackpot lawyers were involved with Trump in the scheme to defraud the United States, to obstruct an official proceeding, and so on. That was the crackpot lawyers are the various unidentified co-conspirators. And, that's what I think he's going to testify about. And based on what we've already seen from him, he's not being shy about saying that there was pressure on him to do something that obviously he was not allowed to do. And I don't think he's going to give Trump the cover of saying, "Oh, well, Trump believed it," because the stuff that Trump was saying to him, the evidence that he's given isn't, "Oh, I believe it, and therefore you should do it." It's that we all know that this is ridiculous, but do it. Don't be a Boy Scout. So, yeah, I don't think that I see him trying to hedge a little bit in some of the stuff he's saying, but I see Pence, at least in the criminal trial, as being a crucial witness against the former president.